Hello, today we're going to be doing a self-portrait chair tile. We are going to be learning how to do a slip transfer and sgraffito background. This chair sits in place of you, so make sure it's in your style. Let me begin with the materials. Today you're going to need a spray bottle, a water cup, various paintbrushes, newsprint paper, sponge, red rib, fettling knife, various cutting tools, underglaze, black and white slip, and a ruler. You're going to want to smooth out the tile first. You can use your red rib and a spray bottle to wet the surface, and then you can use your finger and the red rib to smooth out the tile to how you want the texture. Your tile should still be leather hard, but you should still be careful lifting it up and flipping it because you don't want to damage it. After this step, you want to take your sketch of your design and put it onto your tile with a needle tool. You should be lightly sketching your image into your tile. You don't need to go too far because you're going to be putting a slip transfer over top of it. You will just barely be able to see your image from under the slip transfer. After this step, you're going to want to grab your newspaper and trim the paper to the size of your tile that you're wanting. And just make a light square approximately where your slip transfer is going to go over the chair in this case. To fill up this square as much as you can for your tile. You can then move your tile out of the way and go grab your underglaze colors. You're going to now make the slip transfer design. You're going to need your water, paintbrush, underglazes, newsprint paper, white slip, and like my cat, you can grab your cat too. The black is in a tube to make precision marks rather than the looser paintbrush marks. You can start with whatever color. I'm making a rose design, so I'm going to start with pink, and I'm going to start making my rose design all over the square that I previously made. You can be loose with this process, but you want to make sure your slip is a little bit thick. You want it to be opaque and not transparent. And bam! Now there's more roses, and I change colors here quickly to the lighter pink. And after I get finished with the pink, I move on to the green leaves. I made sure to clean my paintbrush in between so that I didn't mix colors. I also really focused on the randomness of my design. I wasn't super specific on where I put the leaves just to fill up the space that I needed to. Now I'm moving on to the darker green, and I'm just making a little more definition into my design. This green was a little thick, so I added water so that it would still be opaque, but just a little less chunky. For the next minute or so, I continue to fill the page with my design with the roses and the leaves. And afterwards, I will move on to the black precision tip slip. That's a mouthful. Moving on to the precision tip slip that I was talking about, I would grab a sponge or a piece of spare newspaper to set beside you so that you can squeeze it onto there to make sure that it's coming out properly. Many times I've went to make a mark and it just squirted out onto my design, and it is not a good look, so I would try to avoid that. Right now I'm just making some definition into the flowers with the black color and just outlining the flower. I know that the black is going to be on the back of the flowers because as you're doing this, you want to remember that the beginning color that you put down will be in the front of your image, and then the last color that you put on will be the background. Notice that sometimes I go outside of the color because, like I said before, this is going to be the last color, one of the last colors on your design, so you want it to peek out from behind the colors that you've already put down in your slip transfer. You also want to make sure that you don't drag the tip of your slip applicator onto the newsprint because that will cause it to not be a full line and it just won't look as nice. And finally, after I do the leaves, I am finished with my design. As you can see, I filled up the entire square that I had sketched out on the newsprint beforehand, and I'm just going to set this down and let it dry to get leather hard. After not so patiently waiting, we are going to apply the white slip onto the background because that is going to be our background color for the chair. Your design should be leather hard to dry. It should not be wet anywhere or else it could ruin the design when you put the white slip over top of it. So I'm just taking the brush that I have, it's a paint brush, it holds a lot of slip, and I'm just going to do a light layer over top of it. See that I'm mostly going one direction and I'm trying not to ruin my design. Then I'm going to apply a couple more coats until I can no longer see my image. Might want to wait a few moments to apply each layer of the slip. I did about 3 layers just so that you don't keep brushing over the same area but not add any extra slip to the surface. Then wait for it to dry or get leather hard. Now we're just going to apply the slip transfer. You're going to want a red rib, a spray bottle, leather hard or dry slip transfer, like I said. It should look like that. It shouldn't be very shiny at all. You're going to take your water in your spray bottle and spritz the surface of your transfer. And then you are going to also spritz the surface of your tile. Then once you put your transfer on top of it where you want it, make sure it's placed exactly where you want it because it's not going to be easy to come off. And then you spray the top of it. You can see that I'm spraying it. And then you're going to take your red rib and use it almost like a squeegee. Act like we are putting on a temporary tattoo. Continue pressing on the tile and the slip transfer until you see that all the water is out from under it. You should begin to see your imagery as well. Then you should begin slowly bringing your newsprint paper up, and there should no longer be any slip on the newsprint paper. If there is, or if it's catching on the tile, then push it back down and continue squeegeeing it. And voila, there is your slip transfer. Now we are going to remove excess transfer. So I'm just going to go around with any tool that I please. It can be this little needle tool or a trimming tool that I have. Really anything just to remove any slip transfer and reveal the chair that is going to be our imagery. Not only am I taking off the slip transfer, but I'm also removing some of the clay to make the chair stick out a little bit. Here is my tutorial on adding additional transfers. Not only can you add a full transfer onto a tile, but you can also add any additional transfers if you see an area that may not have gotten as much imagery as you would have liked. So that right of my chair, I felt like it was a little too plain, and so I cut out a small piece of newsprint, drew a image of a flower onto it, and I'm just squeegeeing it on like a temporary tattoo again. There we go. Don't forget to spritz your surfaces as well before doing this. Now for the clay etching, you're just going to need a sponge and some water, and you're just going to remove and smooth any excess clay around your chair. Usually you would put wax on top of the chair so that you could go over it and really make the chair pop out, but because I don't have wax, I'm just going to free etch is what I'm going to call it, and remove any of the clay and really try to pop out the chair. I'm just going to continue doing that, as you can see, all the way around it. Make sure you continue to wet the sponge as well. Make sure you keep getting it wet, removing the clay out of it, and you can also take a trimming tool and have the same effect to really sharpen that edge of the chair to bring it out of the space in the background. Once done with the background, smoothing it out, we are going to do the background slip, which is a black slip. I started with a small paintbrush to get the little details, and after a while I switched to my larger slip brush to really pile on the slip in the background. Like with the etching, it would be a little simpler if there was wax on the chairs. You just have to be a little more careful doing it this method. So that is a full background layer, and I'm going to do at least 3 layers of this slip, and while waiting in between each layer just to build up that background, because later we're going to do a sgraffito effect to it. Here I'm adding value to the chair itself. I'm taking the black slip and I'm putting it on the shadows of the chair, on the contours, and on the cushions just to let it have value. Once you are done with the shadows, we are going to work on the white slip. You're going to take the white slip and you're going to focus on the highlights of the chair and making all of the woodwork on your chair to pop out. And I want it all to be white, so I'm just going to go over everywhere that would be white on the chair, which is the legs, the arms of the chair, and around the frame. I also wanted to add highlights to the cushion, so I ended up putting white on the black slip to soften that a little bit, and on the cushions to add highlights so that it seems like there's a light source on the chair itself. I know it may seem redundant, but I go back in with the black slip just on the shadows to really define those arms and legs and to build up shadow, because I want the chair to have value and to pop out in contrast to the background. Once you are finally done with all of the shadows and the deepening of the chair, you're going to sketch the background. You can go back to your sketch that you had earlier and just with your needle tool lightly sketch out where everything's going to be in your image. You don't want to press too hard because you don't want to damage too much of your background before you start your sgraffito. Before you move on, I just want you to take your tools that you'd be using on your tile, and I want you to take a spare tile that you've made and just practice the textures that you might use on your tile, because you want to see what it's going to look like before you start gouging into your tile. So here I am just practicing a scalloped look on my tile, and I'm just doing it, I sped it up so that you can see, and I don't use just one tool. I go in with multiple tools so that I can see which one I would prefer in the background of my tiles. I have to remember that there are going to be multiple textures that I'm going to need for different objects in my background, and also the back wall as well as the floor of my image. Once you have done your practice, you can then move on to your tile with the textures that you've practiced. Now for the Sgraffito background, you can use any of those tools that I was using before, anything that will remove the black and show the color of the clay itself. As you can see, I'm starting with the picture frame in my tile. I'm just working on textures and different things that I want to put in that picture frame to give it life on my tile. I am doing a thin line for the picture frame, and I am making sure to put in any textures that I want before I start on the background. Now I am moving on to the floor of my tile, and I'm just going to use small horizontal marks right on top of each other and next to each other to create a texture of a carpet or just a nice flooring. And I'm going to do that all the way across and moving around the images of the cats. Next, I'm moving on to the pot of with the plant in it, and I'm making sure I have small thin lines to create the illusion of having a pot, and I'm making horizontal lines to contrast with the vertical lines of the flooring. I am now focusing on the plants in the plant holder, and I'm just making diagonal lines rather than horizontal or vertical, just to once I am done with the plant, I'm going to take that tool that I did the scalloped background with in my practice run, and I'm just going to do that all the way across my background, my back wall. I want to add as much texture as I can just to create a little bit of depth in my image. Here I am just adding some texture to my cat image. I have two cats in the background and I'm just creating features and texture in the fur to make it not look like that they're part of the background. I did the same thing with the cat on the left of the tile, with adding texture and some character to it. It's nice to add pets to your imagery because that really defines your space a lot of times in your household. Now I am just taking the black slip to add extra value. I just am taking the small paintbrush and adding value to the ground around the cats to add shadows and just to add a little bit of depth into the image. Now I'm just going to do edge work, which I'm taking that same scalloped texture with this tool from the back wall and I'm doing it all the way around the edge, and then I'm going to add black slip over top of it to give it a little bit of color but also just really add to the texture of the and the finish of the tile. This takes a little bit of time, but I'm just going to speed it up and show you when it's finished and go all the way around every single edge. And at last, here's the final tile. It is a self-portrait with, I have finished edges and I used the slip transfer method and Sgraffito throughout the entire tile. And you can see it's completely finished and it also has a hanging back that you can hang up on the wall with a nail. I am now going to show you just some detail pictures of the details of the Sgraffito, each corner, and the slip transfer. Here's the cat, one of the cats, and the slip transfer with the vibrance of the color to really stand out from the background. I hope you learned a little about my methods and thank you for watching.